Hello and welcome to Basic Medical Sciences. In this video, we're going to talk about adrenergic receptors, right? For what? Flight and fight, right? So these receptors are stimulated by epinephrine and norepinephrine. So epinephrine is also known as adrenaline, and norepinephrine is also known as noradrenaline. Right. So adrenergic receptors can be classified into two groups. Alpha adrenoreceptors or adrenergic receptors is same thing. Alpha adrenoreceptors and beta adrenoreceptors. Right. Starting with alpha adrenoreceptors. Adrenoreceptors can be classified into alpha 1 and alpha 2. Right? And beta adrenoreceptors can be further classified into beta 1, beta 2, and beta 3 adrenoreceptors. Right. So as I said in the previous video, I mentioned that adrenergic receptors are also G protein coupled receptors or 7-pass receptors, right? I mean, the previous video we were talking about cholinergic receptors, right? So you can check on the playlist and watch that video first, right? So you need to know that alpha 1 use GQ pathway and alpha 2 G inhibition, right? So we covered these pathways in the previous video, right? I will do them again here, just a review, right? But for beta adrenoreceptors, just to know, all of them, they use G stimulatory, right? Or G stimulative, right? Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I will review GQ and G inhibitor, and then from there I will talk about like locations of these receptors and main effects, right? So let's start with alpha 1 adrenergic receptors mechanism, right? So here you can see okay, so this one is a cell membrane, right? So this one is a 7-pass receptor, right? Okay, or G protein coupled receptor, right? So the protein here is GQ. Right, so this is what happens when epinephrine or norepinephrine stimulate this receptor. What will happen is like initially this G protein is coupled with GDP, right? It's coupled with GDP. So on stimulation by epinephrine or norepinephrine, it will drop the GDP and it will pick up another molecule called GTP, right? So if it pick up GTP, it will be active, right? So upon its activation, it will activate another protein in the cell membrane, right? So this protein is called phospholipase C, right? So phospholipase C, its function is to convert PIP2, is phosphoinositol diphosphate. It will cleave it into IP3, that's inositol triphosphate, and DAG, that's diacylglyceride, right? Okay, so let's follow here, right? So IP3 is like a calcium pathway, right? So if you know, like smooth muscles, they have a sarcoplasmic reticulum, which are equivalent to smooth endoplasmic reticulum in other cells, right? So in the muscle cells, right, they will like the calcium here will combine with calmodulin, right, forming calcium calmodulin complex, right? So you stop there. Then let's talk about DAG, right? DAG will activate protein kinase C, right? So protein kinase C and calcium calmodulin complex, these two have different effects at molecular level, right? For example, they phosphorylate enzymes. They also increase cell membrane permeability, and in the nucleus, they can stimulate transcription, right? Okay, so let's talk about the second one, the second receptor is alpha 2 adrenergic receptor. I told you alpha 1 is GQ, alpha 2 is G inhibitor, right? So you can see the G inhibitor protein here, right? So this one is your 7-pass receptor, right? So G inhibitor, it is like 3 subunits: alpha, beta, and gamma. Okay, I'm sorry, in the previous video I said it's delta. No, it's gamma, right? So it's gamma, right? So when epinephrine stimulate this receptor will like release this like 2 parts. The first part is this subunit, alpha subunit, right? And the second one is like these two, beta and gamma, right? Beta and gamma. So it will, if you stimulate here, it will just release these two, right? So for now, let's stop here, right? We need to know another enzyme found in the cell membrane called adenylyl cyclase, right? So its function is to convert ATP into cyclic AMP, right? And cyclic AMP is the ability to activate protein kinase A. Protein kinase A, this enzyme can phosphorylate different proteins or enzymes in the cell, right? So this is the basic pathway, right? So if we talk about like after this stimulation, right, this is just like what happens in general, right, without any epinephrine or norepinephrine, right? But if epinephrine or norepinephrine stimulate this G inhibitory pathway, then the alpha subunit will inhibit the adenylyl cyclase. So what will happen if you inhibit this enzyme which convert ATP to cyclic AMP? It means in the cell there will be low levels of cyclic AMP, and there will be low levels of active protein kinase A. Means phosphorylation is very low also, right? Okay, that's for the alpha subunit. It's just inhibition of what? Of adenylyl cyclase, right? What about this other component with beta and gamma, right? So this will act on this channel for potassium, right? So if it opens this channel, potassium will leave the cell, right? So this one is called making inside of the cell more negative is hyperpolarization, right? It's hyperpolarization, right? So in conclusion, in this alpha 2 adrenergic receptor pathway, right, what will happen is like you just need to know the phosphorylation activity will be decreased and the cell will be hyperpolarized, right? So I just told you like the two mechanisms, like alpha 1 and alpha 2. Now let's talk about like the main effects, right? So let's start with alpha 1. So if you stimulate alpha 1, right, this will increase contraction of vascular smooth muscles. Okay, so if you know the structure of blood vessels, right, like arteries to be more specific, they have a tunica media, right? Tunica media is smooth muscles, right? So if you activate these receptors on the skin, it means there will be vasoconstriction because of this contraction, and you know the skin of a person will become pale because there is less blood supply on the skin, right? Because I'm saying like adrenergic receptor flight and fight, right? So the blood will be diverted to muscles, like to other organs, which enables you to run or to fight, right? Okay, then the second one, it increases the contraction of pupillary dilator muscle, right? So like this one, it will be for far vision, right? Dilator pupillae for far vision, and also contraction of sphincter muscles of the bladder and intestine. Yeah. So here we are talking about internal urethral sphincters. We are talking about pyloric sphincters, right? You don't have time for like emptying your bowels or your urinary bladder because you need to run or you need to fight, right? Okay, so that's mainly what happens if you stimulate the alpha 1, right? So if you stimulate alpha 2, remember alpha 2 is inhibitory. So most of its actions is inhibitory, right? For example, if alpha 2 is stimulated, the action will inhibit adrenergic activation. It will inhibit insulin release from the pancreas, right? So here you need to remember, because like there might be some kind of confusion, because pancreas beta cells, they have both alpha 2 receptors and beta 2 receptors, right? So on this part, just know insulin release in the pancreas is inhibited if you stimulate the alpha 2, right? What is the opposite of insulin? There is another hormone which opposes insulin. It's a glucagon, right? It means the glucagon will be released, right? Glucagon is released if glucose is gone. You need more glucose, right? Because if you inhibit insulin, its function is to take glucose from the blood into the cells, right? So if you inhibit insulin, it means there will be more glucose in the blood. That's the aim, right? Okay, then another thing, okay, there is lipolysis, right? Lipolysis in adipose tissue. You also find alpha 2 receptors, but remember the most important ones, if we talk about, if you hear adipose tissue, the most important ones are beta 3. I will tell you about them, right? Right, and lastly here, if you stimulate the alpha 2, there will be inhibition of production of aqueous humor fluid in the ciliary body, right? So if production of aqueous humor is inhibited, it means like this effect is a reduction of what? Of intraocular pressure, right? Okay, so this is what is inhibited if you stimulate the alpha 2 receptors. But it is another thing, because this inhibition of, like, because like I said, alpha 2 is for inhibition, but if you inhibit the receptors on platelets, this will induces platelet aggregation, right? Just to remember this part. It's a little contradictory to what I just told you, but remember, this is very important. It induces platelet aggregation, right? So that's all about alpha adrenal receptors. Now let's talk about beta adrenal receptors, right? So I said we have beta 1, beta 2, and beta 3 adrenergic receptors, right? So just imagine this one is your cell membrane, right? That's what I want to present here. I told you need to know this pathway very well, because I said you have adenylyl cyclase, right? Adenylyl cyclase, right? This enzyme, I said, it converts ATP to cyclic AMP. Cyclic AMP activates protein kinase A, and then protein kinase A phosphorylate different enzymes and proteins in this cell, right? Okay, so now you know the pathway. Now let's talk about the actual adrenal receptor here. I said this one is 7-pass, and it's G stimulatory. If we are talking about beta adrenergic receptors, it's G stimulatory, right? So originally I said it will be binding GDP, right? All of them, they will be binding GDP, right? So if you stimulate this receptor, it will drop off the GDP and will take up GTP. GTP is a source of energy. This will activate the the G-stimulatory protein, right? When it is active, it activates the adenylyl cyclase, right? So if this enzyme's activity is increased, it means the levels of cyclic AMP will be high, meaning to say the active protein kinase A's will be high, and also phosphorylation will be high, right? Okay, so that's everything you need to know about this beta 1, beta 2, and beta 3, right? So now you need to know occurrences and main effects, right? Okay, so let's start with beta 1. Okay, I want to give you the basic things before I put anything on this board. Just to know, beta 1 are found on the conducting system of the heart and juxtaglomerular cells in the kidney. You need to know that, right? So if you stimulate the beta 1, it will increase cardiac output, thereby increasing heart rate, right? And also it will increases heart contractility, and it increase renin secretion, right? So this one is very important. Juxtaglomerular cells, they release renin, right? Renin cleaves angiotensinogen into angiotensin 1, right? So that's the renin angiotensin aldosterone system. We will talk about it later, right? But this pathway increases blood pressure, right? It increases blood pressure. We will talk about it later. And also it increases lipolysis, right? But I told you, like, the main one for lipolysis, just to remember, beta 3, right? But I'm just giving you everything so that when you see the question in the MCQ, you have clarity. Let's talk about beta 2. Beta 2 increases vasodilation. Before that, you need to know beta 2 receptors are found, or like mainly in the tunica media of blood vessels of viscera, right? Of like visceral organs, right? We are talking about blood vessels of internal organs, right? Okay, so and of the heart. So here you need to know heart and lungs, right? So if you stimulate the beta 2, you increase vasodilation and perfusion in the heart muscle, in the heart blood vessels, and also lungs, right? It will also increase lipolysis and increase insulin release. I told you about this presence of alpha 1, alpha 2, and beta 2, right? So if you stimulate beta 2, it means there will be release of what insulin, right? It increases insulin secretion, uh, and also it will increase glycogenolysis. Glycogenolysis is this like will be, what do you call this, like breakdown of glycogen into what, into glucose, right? The monomers, right? And also it increases production of aqueous humor fluid, right? So this action actually increases the intraocular pressure, right? And also it increases hypokalemia, right? It increases hypokalemia, thus increase the uptake of what, of potassium. So there will be high potassium in the cells and low in blood, right? So this is what increases if you stimulate the beta 2. What decreases, right? So if you stimulate here, there will be decreased smooth muscle tone, right? Of which smooth muscles in the bronchi, right? There will be bronchodilation. You want to breathe, you want enough oxygen so that you can fight or you can run, right? And also in uterus, right? This one is called tocolysis, right? Oh, you need to remember this thing. Switching of receptors. If a patient is not pregnant, the main receptors found on the uterus are alpha 1. If the patient is pregnant, beta 2. Non-pregnant, alpha 1. Pregnant, beta 2. Right. There are some processes which I didn't mention here, like which are increased if you stimulate the beta 2, right? For example, like in the GIT, peristalsis will be inhibited, right? Peristalsis will be inhibited. Also, processes like absorption of nutrients or secretion, gastric secretion, will be inhibited, right? They will only be stimulated in parasympathetic conditions, right? We talked about it in the previous video on cholinergic receptors, right? Now let's talk about the last one, the beta 3, right? So if you stimulate the beta 3, there will be increased lipolysis, right? So I indicated here with a circle. You need to remember this. There's increased lipolysis if you stimulate beta 3. I said there are more beta 3 receptors on the adipocytes, and also if you stimulate the beta 3 in this skeletal muscles, there will be increased heat production, thus thermogenesis. And also you need to remember there are few beta 3 receptors on the urinary blood, right? So if you stimulate the beta 3, smooth muscle relaxation in the blood will increase, right? That's this point. All right. So to wrap up concerning smooth muscles, I have like a simple trick to remember this, right? Okay, so it goes like this. If we talk about GQ calcium contraction, right? So GQ, if you stimulate GQ, there will be smooth muscle contraction, right? And if you stimulate the beta 2, right? Beta 2, this beta 2 will relax the smooth muscles, right? So the smooth muscles will relax if you stimulate the beta 2. Thank you so much. If you like this video, please make sure you subscribe so that you won't miss any of our latest videos. Thank you so much. Until next time.